All right, y'all. Happy Friday. Got some major breaking news to cover. We were going to do an extra pod, but I'm going to do that next week instead. So we're just doing a breaking news video here on YouTube. So there is no extra pods. If you're looking for the extra pod on the Spotify podcast feed, I wasn't able to do one today. We are doing a breaking news video, sort of going over stuff we couldn't go over on the show this week because we couldn't do a secondary show on Tuesday. So there's that. So first off, the first breaking news we're going to cover is, of course, yesterday EA Sports did have their reveal for both Madden and for college football. We're going to cover mainly the college football stuff, the Madden stuff. Like, that was fun in it itself. But, of course, this show that we do is a college football show. So we'll cover the college football stuff related to the game and kind of give you guys my thoughts on it and kind of give you guys a little bit of a breakdown of what was revealed and what's sort of happening. So overall, I thought the presentation was pretty good, right? The last couple of years, how EA's done it, it's been, okay, we'll put out the first trailer, and then we'll start doing, every other week. I think it was like bi-weekly or weekly or whatever, when they'll do like these deep dive videos, and they'll put out the blog posts. And it was a bit of, it worked, I guess, for a couple of years, but I think people started to get very impatient with it. And I think EA sort of started to realize that. So thankfully, they did end up changing that, and they're now doing, at least like going forward, a much larger presentation where they're explaining everything. And they're doing it in one big live stream. So that is good that they're doing that. Change it up a little bit. I think overall it was a pretty good presentation. We got to see all of the figures from EA, like Scott Gallagher and all the folks over there. They did a fantastic job, by the way. The college football team, at least from my experience so far, they did a good job. And they did a good job yesterday doing the presentation. I felt pretty good. We got to see a lot of different folks. Of course, most of you probably tuned into Bordeaux's live stream yesterday, him doing Dynasty. So I'll go over mainly Dynasty stuff, some presentation stuff and whatnot. Gameplay stuff, based on what I can tell from either Bordeaux's video or the stuff that EA showed us properly, it doesn't look too much different. Gameplay-wise, it looks about the same, which is what you would expect. It's football, right? You're not going to expect a whole lot of changes with the gameplay system, how the game feels. Even going to the current game that's available for you to play right now, and going to going back to the game that was released when the series came back a couple years ago, not much change in the gameplay even going to the current game that's out right now. So based on what I have seen both from Bordeaux's videos and from EA's videos, or at least the stuff that they've released, from what I can tell, the gameplay is still mostly the same, so that's fine with me. Presentation-wise, yes, the scoreboard is still the same. I think the scoreboard from this year's game is fine, I guess. It gets the job done. I think it's a lot better than last year's or the previous game. So them not changing the scoreboard that much is fine. Some new things have added in. So I mentioned yesterday my theory as to why, and of course we all know now that Kirk Herbstreit is not part of the game in terms of the commentating crew. It's now who is replacing him is actually Joel Klatt from Fox. So that is a bit of a surprise for me. I thought initially, like I said on the show yesterday, it was going to be Charles Davis, who's been a part of the Madden series. I think it's, for the longest time, it was him and Brandon Gaudin doing the commentary for Madden. Now, I think being introduced last year to have like 3 commentating crews. So people thought, well, at least me, well, it's not other people, but me mainly, my theory yesterday was, maybe this will be a bit of a trade-off where you'll bring in Kirk doing Madden, then you'll have Charles Davis doing college football. Because again, remember, Charles Davis is replacing Gary Danielson, who has now retired from CBS, right? But it's not the case. They brought in Joel Klatt, which is interesting to say the least. Because again, this is, at least for the first time from what I can remember, EA, at least for the college football side, actually bringing in a non-ESPN related personality. So that is pretty cool that we're doing that. It's interesting how they've kept that pretty much close to the vest. It's not been leaked out. At least who was replacing Kirk. We knew Kirk was leaving or was not going to be a part of it, at least this year's game, a couple of days ago from a leak, or not a leak, but a report from Pianecos over on 3. So now we know who's replacing Kirk. It's Joel Klatt. So that's pretty cool. I don't mind Joel Klatt. I think he's actually one of the better one of the better color commentator guys in all of college football. He does a pretty good job. Of course, he has his own show on his own YouTube channel. So look, I've had my own issues with Klatt in terms of him being more pro Big Ten and more slanted towards that way instead of being more open to all parties. But I guess over the years, I have opened up more towards Klatt's thinking of, the Big Ten is the more superior conference right now. So anyway, glad Klatt's involved. And it is interesting that EA is willing to bring in non-ESPN related personalities. personalities, at least for doing for college football. Yes, they don't have the ESPN license, but they have been, at least for the past couple of years, and going back to the original game series, they've mainly stuck to like an ESPN flavored commentary crew and overall presentation, right? So that is interesting that they are actually doing that. Excuse me. So that is cool that they did announce that Joel Klatt is officially a part of the EA Sports commentary crews, at least going forward. I don't know if this will be a permanent change or we'll go through this again in a couple of years. Speaking of additions, we did get the confirmation that, of course, Hollywood will be a part of the game. Now, Hollywood will be only a part of the big game crew, right? So if, for example, in Dynasty, if your game is a part of the game of the week, you'll get, of course, Chris Fowler, Joel Klatt, and Hollywood on the sidelines. My understanding is that Hollywood will only be a voiceover, a voice-only role, instead of actually seeing her like you do in 2K, for example. If you ever seen like gameplay of that, they'll have the sideline reporters, like a CGI version of them and whatnot. I don't think you're going to see that, at least in that way, with Hollywood. Now, there are rumors out there that you do actually see Hollywood somewhere on the sidelines, like someone that looks like her. I don't know if that's true or not. That was a rumor that was put out there a couple of days ago, over the weekend, or this past weekend. So, I mean, that could be wrong, and that could be just a troll or whatnot, but that is something that is out there for sure. So we'll see. That is actually the case. So that also got confirmed yesterday. Of course, the actual big thing I think a lot of folks were wondering was Dynasty mode, right? Now, they did announce some stuff for Road to Glory. The fact that you can now choose different positions now. I think like tight end is a new one, maybe some stuff on defense, but definitely new positions there. There's also a new player archetype system that you can either create your own character, you can make them however you want them to be, or you can do a legend, right? So they have like Johnny Man, like mainly for quarterbacks, I think, at the moment. At least that was released publicly. So some of the quarterbacks they have there, it's like Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, Michael Vick, Steve Young, even. So that's pretty cool that they have that, at least for quarterbacks. I don't know if they're doing that for all positions. So like for tight end, I guess they'll have like a Tony Gonzalez template or a Rob Gronkowski template or like a Brock Bowers template. I don't know about that, but at least for quarterbacks, they are giving you that option to go like to have like a legend type build. So that is pretty cool on top of different attributes and stuff like that. Have some issues with the type of like how they label the type of players or the legends players. Like for example, they have Johnny Manziel being a backfield creator, but the guy was a clearly dual threat quarterback, and they have who was it? I think they have Tim Tebow and Cam Newton, like different archetypes, even though they're both like built the same way. I don't know. That just some stuff I don't like, some logic I don't really understand. Like why would they go that direction? But anyway, so that's pretty cool for Road to Glory. Sorry, my brain just quit there for a second. But yeah, that's good for the Road to Glory players, that you're given more options, if you will, for player positions and for how you can create your player. I think otherwise, I think everything is pretty much the same as last year. So not a big high school experience, which is fine, I guess, for me, I guess, because I don't, even back in the old games, I felt like, or at least felt like to me, that high school took a little too long, in my opinion. So I'm glad that they're sort of keeping that mostly the same. I think some folks were hoping it would give you a higher or a longer high school experience. It's selling. That's the situation there for Road to Glory. But yeah, I think that's it for Road to Glory. I think that's kind of all the changes there. I know there was some other stuff that came out about like how you can do like team builder teams in there. Apparently, you can do that for like the college schools and not just for high school now. Apparently, so that's kind of cool. More on team builder in a minute, but it does look like that most of the changes in Road to Glory are mostly minor stuff, but at least other than the player creation stuff. And of course, there's also the equipment stuff, which is pretty cool, like the hanging mouthpieces and other new helmet designs and things like that, which is cool. I do like how EA has given you that option to do that. So kudos to them for doing that. I think that's it for Road to Glory, if I recall correctly. But the big one I think a lot of folks are wondering is Dynasty mode. I think that's what everyone was excited about when, of course, this game was coming out, because a lot of folks were hoping that this would be another facelift, sort of like last year. Though I will say the transition from the first game, CFB 25, to this current game that's out available, CFB 26, very minor, but at least it was understandable. Like, look, it's familiar, if you will, to for people who are, maybe just getting back into the game of, or at least getting back to playing college football, the video game. So at least that's I think that is why they kept it similar. Now this year's jump from last year to this year, I think it's pretty significant. We'll start off with the presentation overall, like the user interface. Like I mentioned yesterday, based on some of the stuff I was hearing, definitely leaning towards Madden. So that didn't shock me. I think it shocked a lot of other people that there are sort of moving away from the sort of quasi college football revamped look to now more closer to Madden. I think a lot of folks are sort of shocked by that. I wasn't, based on what I was hearing from folks on on social media that were reporting, hey, the user interface is going to look a little bit different than it has been the last couple of games. So that didn't surprise me. Now, does it look good? Does it look bad? I think parts of it look pretty good. Does it still feel like the previous two games? Like, does the user interface still at least look similar? Yeah, and I think my fear of it looking way too much like Madden, to where it's like the menus are very confusing and there's a lot of different things you have to press through and whatnot. It's still simple like the previous two games, but the designs are obviously way more skewed towards Madden now, which is fine. I understand that, given it's been a couple of years, I think the plan was overall, at least in my opinion, to eventually transition closer towards Madden, at least having more alignment with Madden. But it's still simple as it is, and it still does feel like the older games, and it still does feel like in some way like College War revamp. But it is definitely more inspired by Madden. It is more inspired by Madden now. It has definitely moved the needle towards that way even more now, which is fine. And I think what we saw yesterday, based on whether it's Bordeaux's videos or the videos from EA that they provided yesterday on the stream, again, it does not look like an actual Madden reskin. It's just leaning towards Madden, and I think that's fine. I think a lot of folks can accept that. Now they did that the first 2 years, I think a lot of folks would be like, "Whoa, hold on a minute, this is looking a little too much like Madden." I think now, since you've gotten them invested now, at least us, the core players, I think it's fine. Yes, does the loading screen with the weird like slanted menus thing, does it look a little weird? Yes, but again, based on Bordeaux's footage, once you click on, I guess once you click something or whatever, the actual menus get more straight or whatever. I don't know. Looks cool, but the design's definitely unique, I guess. But I mean, after looking at it for the past few hours or so, it doesn't bother me anymore. I will say at the beginning it was very jarring, but overall that was fine. Now we get into, I guess before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of Dynasty proper, more presentation stuff to bring up. Dynamic weather, that was, of course, leaked out a couple of days ago. We got to see that more in Madden than in college football, at least in the presentation EA gave off. So I guess how it's going to be for both games this year, it's going to be in a game. Like, for example, if you choose a Florida school, let's just say I choose what I'm probably going to choose as my first, at least one of my first dynasties on the game is Florida State. I live in Florida. I'm more of a leaning towards the Florida State fan. At least I support them. So let's just say I choose Florida State, for example, right? At least early on in the year in Florida, if EA did this correctly, around at least early on in the college football season, so late August, September, October, here in Florida, from now, from when I'm recording this, all the way until, around October, we have the wet season, right? The rainy season. And what that means is, I'm not going to bore you guys with the meteorology of all of it. Here in Florida and most of the Southeast, we get afternoon thunderstorms, right? They're not necessarily severe storms, but they're just afternoon storms. But the thing is that they don't last that long, right? The rain typically lasts an hour or so, and then the storms pulse down, they go away. What I'm thinking is, if EA did this correctly, which this could be pretty cool, is that, well, yes, they can't really do a traditional lightning delay or whatnot like you would see in real life. It'll just be heavy rain. If EA did this correctly, is that if you have a game with a Florida school, again, let's just use Florida State as an example here, you play as them in maybe one of your home games in late August, early September, or throughout much of September, you have a game when it's raining, but, let's just say the game starts at 3:30, right? And that's around the time the afternoon storms here in Florida start to form, once the sea breezes start to collide and whatnot, right? So once that happens around 3:30, once, that time happens in real life, when you get the storm still in the game, maybe if you have a game at 3:30, that starts at 3:30, it's raining at the beginning of the game. But as you go through the game, maybe the rain gets a little more heavier a little bit by the second quarter. But once you get past halftime, it's like the skies are starting to clear. So if EA did this properly, that could be pretty cool. And hopefully they did their research. And look, I mean, EA is based out of Orlando, so they should know how the Florida weather pattern works during this time of the year. So hopefully they actually did that correctly, and it works in a way that it logically makes sense, right? So no longer now that you have games where it's just raining the entire time. You'll actually see a tempered or a tapered progression of heavy rain at the beginning of the game. Maybe it starts to taper off by the third and fourth quarter. Maybe it starts to clear out by then. So that is pretty cool. The EA is actually implementing that system into Madden to college football. Also, a new thing that is being issued into college football. I don't know if it's in Madden or not. I don't think it is, because the NFL doesn't really do stadium crowd themes, but they do in college football, right? And it looks like that EA, based on what we have seen, and obviously they confirmed this, for Dynasty, and I believe for Play Now as well, and maybe Road to Glory, but I think it's mainly for Play Now and also Dynasty, clearly, you can choose what crowd theme you want. So, like, for example, if you're a Penn State fan, if you like the whiteout, which I'm sure most of you, if you're a Penn State fan, you do, you can choose to have the whiteout every single home game of your season in Dynasty mode or in Play Now. That is your choice. You can control that. I actually like that. I think EA doing this is good. Now, look, they've had the crowd patterns and stuff in the game the past couple of years, but it was mainly just AI driven, where it's like, I think it followed like a system where it's like, hey, there was like certain games, like for example, if you did a dynasty with Tennessee, like I have actually, I just started one about a month ago. I've noticed with Tennessee is that they only have the checkered of Neyland for like certain like rivalry games, like the Florida game if it's at home, or like the Bama game, right, the third Saturday of October, and that's it. That's the only time that I think they only do, at least in the game, checker kneeling, and that's it. Now, what sucks is that if you had like a big non-con home game against, like, I don't know, like USC or Clemson or something like that, you couldn't, it was more of a by chance if you just got the checkered of kneeling. So now in this year's game, you can choose whatever crowd pattern you want. It's like, so for example, for Ohio State, if you want all gray or all red or all black, you can do that. If you want to do that for an FCS team, you can go ahead and do that. No one's stopping you. EA won't stop you from doing that. So that's cool. They're doing that. Trying to think anything else presentation-wise besides those two. I think that's probably it, at least from that standpoint. Now, another thing I want to talk about before we get to the actual like nuts and bolts again of Dynasty. I know this video is going to be pretty long, by the way. Like, we're about 17 minutes into the recording, so there's a lot of news to get to here. I'm just going to try to get through this as fast as I can. Before we get into the actual, meat and potatoes of Dynasty here, one thing I did notice that they did add in, which is really, really cool, is adding in more cultural history stuff, right? So last year they added in the history tab, and there's a lot of information in there. That's, what I've said before, at least privately off camera, is I've sort of called it like a college football Wikipedia in the game, which is pretty cool. And then of course it updates throughout your Dynasty life file cycle. But now what they've added is that they've added a couple of new sections, I believe, where they have team overall records, which will update every single year, or I think during your Dynasty life cycle. And they've also added a team-specific individual seasons, which is cool. And this sort of harkens back to NCAA 14, because in NCAA 14, how you would used to do that, in NCAA 14, the previous games, where you would have to, I believe, go to what is like the coach info section. You have to click on like individual coaches like contract, and you could actually see like that bar graph screen where you have like the progression graph, I think that's what it's called or whatever, and the coaching contract thing. That's where you would be able to see like the teams overall, like the individual seasons, right? How they did the past few years. Now, in the last two games since the series came back, you couldn't do that. You can only do that for your team only. And unfortunately, that bar graph gets smaller and smaller as you go through Dynasty. So what EA decided is to, hey, instead of doing what we did in the old game, let's just add in a team, like basically a full-on team encyclopedia, or a full-on wiki almost for all these teams. And again, these teams' records and their individual season records, and I believe it also has their bowl appearances, and then if they won the conference title and whatnot, those will update throughout your Dynasty life during your time in your Dynasty file. So that's pretty cool, and kudos for them doing that. because I think a lot of folks were complaining that you had to literally keep track of this stuff on your own, like on your phone with like a notes app or whatever. So thank you, EA, and those folks over there for finally giving us an even better stat tracking, um, even in last year's game, which was good in by itself. But I think this new stuff they're adding in with like the team overall records and the team individual season records, that is great, and I think that's good for us to no longer like use our phones and like our spreadsheets and our computers to update our tracking our seasons and whatnot. So that is good that they did that. So that is a new addition that I don't think a lot of folks are talking about. I think that's really, really cool. So they literally have now with this year's game now a full-on college football Wikipedia now, which is pretty cool. Which is something that is kind of funny as they didn't even consider doing in the previous games going back to 10 years ago, which is pretty cool. So kudos for EA for doing that. They didn't have to do that, but it is cool that I think they realized, hey, like these Dynasty nerds want to, have this stuff available to them instead of having to track it on their like computer and stuff. So that is pretty cool that they did that. Now, one thing I did not see that I am a little bit surprised they did not do, at least to my knowledge, they haven't added, is a rivalry tracker, right, in the college football history tab. I'm surprised they haven't done that yet. Maybe they have, and they just didn't reveal it yesterday, or they're going to in like a future title update. But that is interesting that they did not have anything that shows tracking your rivalry, your record with your rivals, right, or just a history tab with overall rivalry records and game results. Because so far in the game, in college football, at least with last year's game, and it seems like in this year's game too, that you can't really track your rivalry record with your team-specific rivals unless you keep track of it on your phone or whatever, on a spreadsheet, which sucks. And hopefully EA will implement something sort of like that into the game, whether it's in next year's game or maybe this year, and hopefully in a future title update. I think they did something sort of like that last year. They added in something late. Maybe there was plans for that. But anyway, so that's all out of the way with that stuff of Dynasty. Now we can get into the actual cool stuff. The new, actual new things Dynasty. So they added in NIL. That's in the game. We knew it would be in the game, but how they did it is very similar to NCAA 14, where you had to say point system, essentially, where basically they're calling it a point system, but it's really like digital, fake, like monopoly level cash, right? And how it works, at least the way it's been explained, is that it's set to, I guess, your team specifically. So the way it's set to all these teams, it's how it's going to be. Now, I believe you could change it if you were to move conferences. So I believe how it works, and I could be wrong on this, where, like, for example, if you choose, I don't know, like Louisiana Monroe, right? And you move them to, like, I don't know, the Big 12 for some reason. The amount of dynasty points you have will increase, I believe. So, like, I think there was something that Bordeaux showed yesterday when it was doing this dynasty live stream, when it was doing the custom conferences, that it mentions there's like a little warning screen that says, hey, by doing this, you should be aware that, hey, if you move teams around, your dynasty points are going to change, at least the amount of points they have available to them. If you move teams up or down, they'll decrease or increase. So that is cool that that does change a little bit. But yeah, so they have this new model of dynasty points. It's mainly for, I believe, 3 things mainly. So the first thing is obviously NIL. That's basically, again, think of these points as like monopoly money in the game, that you use these points to allocate your resources to NIL. And that's tied into recruiting. So now recruiting is even more harder now with a lot of these 5-star recruits that are generated through the AI of the game, is that most of these 5-star, 4-star recruits are going to want a lot of money or points allotted to them. And if you lowball them, they're not going to recruit to you. And there's also another thing too added in recruiting, that is you can have now decommits and flips, which is cool. Now, technically it was in the game, but it was just very rare for some reason. But I think EA fixed it now to where it is a part of the game now, where it can actually happen a lot, and it happens pretty frequently, apparently. So that is pretty cool. You can do that. And of course, the NIL portion of recruiting also affects the transfer portal too. So that is cool that they've added that into the game. Everything else besides that in recruiting is mostly the same, at least from what I can tell. Now, the second part that these dynasty points are allocated to is coaching staff. So when you do the coaching carousel, which they also changed, which thank you, and it actually looks more like NCAA 14 than the previous game, so thank you for that, EA. Now, I will say the one thing about the coaching carousel that is interesting is that, again, much like NCAA 14, you can apply for any job you want, unlike it has been the past 2 games where the game just gives you jobs to look at, and at least jobs that you're only going to be available to get. So literally now the coaching carousel in the new game is basically like a job website kind of where you can just apply for any jobs you want, which is kind of cool. So it's sort of like a video game version of like Indeed or something like that. Not literally like that, but the idea is like, you can go on there and apply for any jobs you want. But the interesting thing is that if you start applying for jobs, your coach prestige will drop, which makes sense, right? Because that signals to recruits or players on your roster that, hey, you're actively trying to leave, and they may try to leave. Now, the one thing I will say, sort of tying this into the NIL, is they introduced last year the ability for you to control the transfer portal. So I wonder if EA still, now they didn't mention it yesterday that they took away this feature of being able to like limit or like to decrease or increase the amount of players you can have enter the portal in your dynasty file, whether it's your own, the team you're controlling, or the AI's teams, or the AI or the NPC teams. To me, based on what I can tell, now again, I don't know for sure. Now, look, Bordeaux will have a video out this weekend, I believe, talking about Dynasty, so he may explain this a little bit more. But at least what it seems like to me, that feature of controlling how many folks or players can leave the portal, both with NPC teams and your team you're controlling, that's still there. So you can literally turn off the portal, and that's not a factor for players to leave. But it is still a factor with recruiting. So I guess it doesn't really help you that much. But that is interesting that they supposedly still have that feature in the game, but now NIL is a part of the game. So I don't know if they took that feature away now because NIL is a part of the game, and that's kind of like cheating the system. I don't know. We'll see when the game comes out, and we'll see if anyone talks about it. Because EA, at least from what I can tell, whether it was in the deep dive or in the live stream yesterday, they didn't bring it up. So I'm assuming that feature is still in the game. So we'll see when the game gets here for everyone, if you can still control how many players leave your team or leave other teams. I would assume it's still in the game, but it wouldn't surprise me if EA decided, we shouldn't probably have this in there, as this is kind of cheating a little bit, at least cheating the system a little bit with the dynasty points. So who knows? Maybe they end up turning it off. There's also another thing too they added in was like a new practice thing, but I guess it's sort of like Madden a little bit, if I recall correctly, where there's this like practice thing. I think you can make that to where the CPU just does it for you. Now, if you turn injuries off, which I'm assuming that's still a feature in the game, then that's not a problem for you or whatever. But so yeah, those are the two things. And then the third thing that Dynasty Points are a part of is, I believe this is the last thing, is with, I just forgot about it. Oh yeah, facilities, right? So in the game, you can now upgrade facilities. Now, not like literally upgrade facilities that are not that are real teams. Now, for team builder teams, that's different. That's a whole other conversation with team builder. Is that you can now upgrade off-screen facilities, wherever it's adding in, I don't know, like new features to your football facility, or like adding in different things to the stadium that you don't really see on camera, or at least in the game. So that's pretty cool. That's in the game as well. Now, real quick, for Team Builder, they've added in some new features as well. So you can now have, there's now a stadium creator, which is cool. Let me backtrack. It's not an actual stadium creator. It's just a stadium. It's like a stadium editor or something like that. It's not like a real stadium creator, but it's like kind of, it's like a quasi version of it. But yeah, so basically what it's explained in the Dynasty Deep Dive is that if you choose one of the custom stadiums, so like for this year in the game for Team Builder, they gave you the option to have or to choose from like 4 or 5 custom generic stadiums. Now what it seems like, now you can go into the stadium editor, you can add in different things. It seems like you can add in crowd patterns where you can do your themed crowds, or add in your own unique goalposts, and you can do other things, I think. Now, I don't think there's anything with advertisements, which I thought, look, if they were going to do this, I thought, at least in my mind, hey, maybe they'll do sort of like you can do in 2K, you can have your own ads on the stadium. I know in 2K you can do that with the video boards on the sidelines and whatnot, but doesn't sound like you can do that in college football, at least yet. Maybe in the future they'll let you do that. But yeah, so to have a stadium editor, you can also have and choose from different sound files, I believe. So that's pretty cool. I think you can also, don't quote me on this because I don't remember for sure, but you can also upload your own file. Apparently, I don't know for sure, but I know they have their own pre-recorded files and whatnot. and they also have like sound recordings too, like sound effects you can have in your stadium and different songs that are licensed to EA to use that you can play throughout your stadium. So basically, stadium customization got a whole lot better with Team Builder this year. And I'm trying to think here. So on top of that, you also have a brand new history part of your Team Builder team that you can add in like school records. So unlike the past couple of years, when you use a Team Builder team, you replace it with a pre-existing school. The school that you replaced, their actual real records are still in the game. But now that's not the case anymore. But I think what has not changed and what is not something they've added in yet is that the school that you took over, their history in terms of their past records and past accomplishments, that's still going to be in the game. So unfortunately, you're kind of halfway there with like totally erasing that school that you're replacing their entire history. But it's getting better per se. But look, hopefully EA maybe in the future title update they'll add in a new feature to where you can add in I don't know like a team like actual like record history on the team like record history or something like that, or a more specific history for your Team Builder team. But anyway, I think that's it for the college football stuff. 31 minutes. Wow, it's a lot of things to cover. Moving right along here. Got some more things to discuss here. Let's see. Yeah, so NC State, Virginia. Now we're talking about real life college football here. Moving on to that. That game is not being played on campus. I believe at Virginia, I don't think it's in Raleigh. It's in Charlottesville. This game, by the way, was originally supposed to be played in Brazil, but now it's being moved back to the United States and off a neutral site. Thank you. Again, like I've been saying, and other folks have been saying, keep college football games on campus. Now, the reason why this is happening, I have two personal theories. One of them, I think it's because of how Brazil is, where it's it's not the safest place in the world, and I think a lot of certain folks at both universities were not totally comfortable with playing a game over in Brazil, which has a very, very let's just say very shady situation in terms of street violence. Best way I can put it without getting into trouble. So yeah, that game's being moved out of Brazil and will be played on a college campus. Now, unfortunately, I believe there's another game that's being played in Italy or something like that that's still going on. I don't actually probably go and just look it up. I believe there is yet another international game. I know there's the TCU UNC game, but I believe there's another game that's taking place over in overseas, I believe. Let me just check here online here. I'm pretty sure, yes, there's the Aer Lingus football classic. That's still going on. But I think was there like another one or something? Maybe there's only just two. But so yeah, that's the third. That's the first and more official reason. Now the other reason I think this is happening is because, of course, as most of you know, there's this situation or crisis in the Middle East, which is the reason why you're seeing a lot of like gas prices going up and things like that. Look, I'm not getting into all the politics here, but like I said on the extra pod a few months ago, that when someone asked me the question, hey, could this potential situation in the Middle East, could it, impact college football? And I said, yeah, it's going to. And I mentioned more specifically these international games. And I thought, look, if this energy crisis continues going on and nothing gets solved, you're going to see some of these schools say, hey, look, we're not going to pay this amount of money to go travel overseas and have, pay a lot more money than we were going to anyway. So I think that's also part of the reason why you're seeing this game get moved. I know no one else is saying that, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think that's part of it. And look, this is nothing to bring in the political side of it. I'm just saying that could be another reason why as well. And it'll be interesting to see. Now, again, it looks like the TCU UNC game is still going to be played in Ireland, so at least that game's still happening. But I do believe, yeah, this energy, oil, gas crisis is also part of the reason why this game is being moved. At least that's another reason why. But I think the main reason probably is the whole, street violence stuff that Brazil apparently deals with. That also is an issue as well, apparently. At least that's the main reason why they're removing the game. So, yeah. So anyway, basically the main thing is, look, I mean, we are finally starting to see a little bit of a change in terms of teams and schools being willing to move games back to campus. So that is good. We are starting to see that. And obviously, you guys know my stance on neutral site games. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't like it, at least when it comes to regular season games. Now, the postseason stuff, I don't care. That's fine. If you want to have your your game at, Mercedes-Benz Stadium or at, US Bank Stadium or whatever, that's fine. I don't really care. But any of these regular season games, especially rivalry games and whatnot, like Georgia Tech last year was in Mercedes-Benz, even though you could have easily had the game at Bobby Dodd Stadium. For some reason, I guess they decided not to because it wasn't good enough for some reason. But again, like I've been saying on Twitter and on here, keep college football games on campus. It's not that hard. I mean, for the NFL side of things, I get it. That's why they do it. But for college football, I just don't understand why. And I think it is good that we're starting to see some people, albeit it's not for the reasons why we want it to be, but some folks are starting to realize how stupid and silly this is. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah. So I want to talk about this. So we're sort of moving off from football now and talking about Marvel stuff now. So Avengers. So earlier this week, then we'll wrap up the video with this. So earlier this week, or actually was it last week? Last weekend? Yeah, I guess it was last weekend. I saw this when I was traveling back here to Jacksonville last week. I'm back from my trip up to North Carolina. But anyway, yeah. So I saw this last week. This thing that the Russo brothers are tweeting out saying, "Hey, there's an announcement coming on Tuesday, 2 p.m. British time or whatever," and that correlates to 9 o'clock Eastern time and whatnot. And a lot of folks thought, "Hey, this could be a trailer coming out, right?" I think the Russo brothers were over in London for some like South by Southwest event. And a lot of folks got bamboozled and, the whole Fell For It Again award of going, "Oh, yeah, there's a trailer coming out, right?" Because the Russo brothers are announcing this. They're saying, "Hey, there's a surprise at 2 o'clock, whatnot." Maybe we should expect that they're going to release the trailer because as of right now, as I'm recording this, the Avengers Doomsday trailer has not been released yet. It has still not been released. So only folks who have seen the trailer are folks who were at CinemaCon back in April now, which is now 2 months, about to be 3, or folks who somehow saw leaked footage of it. Okay, so this trailer has not been released yet, and it's getting to the point where a lot of folks are getting very mad about it. And look, I don't blame them, man. I think this trailer realistically should have been out by now. Now you can say, "Hey, look, Marvel's just doing it because it's a marketing campaign and they want to drag this out as long as they can. And maybe they're waiting until Comic-Con to debut it and then they'll release it online." Maybe that's the case, but okay, so back to this whole event or this whole situation. So with that announcement from the Russo brothers saying, "Hey, look, we have this announcement at 2 o'clock, British time," which would have been 9 a.m. here on the East Coast in the United States, people thought, okay, look, this is probably a trailer. This could be what it is. And you had a lot of folks doing live streams. So they have like new rock stars doing it. I think who was it? Screen Crush did one, and a few others did live streams covering this. And I think even Josh over at Den of Nerds was considering doing a live stream. But what is interesting, and I think people should have done this now, for me personally, leading up to this, I wasn't quite sure this was actually going to be a trailer. Because a lot of folks, the reliable folks on at least the more reliable social media scoopers, said nothing about this. The only people who were saying, "Oh, hey, there's a trailer coming out, bro. You should, maybe change your plans Monday morning and go see what's going on, bro." Those are people like the Beyond Reporter, who I think their account got suspended again. So yeah, go figure. Some of these weird like I don't know. I guess I don't want to call them like stupid scoopers, but I guess they kind of are because they're not really smart and they. I don't know. It's a whole thing. Like, Josh over at Den of Nerds has talked about on his channel about these like newer scoopers, like people not like Alex Perez, who I think is probably the gold standard when it comes to scooping Marvel news. Most of these guys on Twitter now or X, they're not really plugged in anymore. Or at least they're not plugged in anymore. It's just that they're not plugged in. Period. Like these guys are not very smart, so these guys really fell for it. And so yeah, my stance before this trailer came out, I was like, look, I'm not expecting it, but hey, look, the NBA Finals are this week. They did something last year with the Fantastic Four. They could do something with, the finals happening this week, the NBA Finals. So that's what I was thinking. Look, again, there might not be a trailer, but I will be paying attention to the social media feeds and whatnot. So 9 o'clock came, and all it was a like coffee shop promotion thing where the Russo brothers were teaming up with this coffee shop and they were selling this like Doctor Doom themed Latveria coffee, which is, that's cool. I guess if you're a fan of coffee, I'm not myself personally. I'm more, I'm not a big fan of drinking something hot in the morning. Usually, much more prefer something cold. But okay, that's pretty cool for those of you who love coffee. Maybe it's a nice souvenir and whatnot. But a lot of these folks who were live streaming and had all these videos ready to go and whatnot, boy, these people got pissed off, man. Like they were mad, and I can understand why. They basically took out. I think one of these guys took out like a full-on hour of just sitting there interacting with chat and whatnot, and wondering what this was going to be. Then once he started to realize, I forgot the guy's name. I think it's like Everything Always or whatever. Michael Ronan, I believe. I was watching him, and he was like, "Man, this better not be the coffee thing, right? This cannot be it." And then he starts to realize, "Oh shit, it is!" And I really just wasted like an hour and 35 minutes of being on YouTube and doing absolutely nothing and reacting to like a coffee promotion thing. So that's what happened, and a lot of folks aren't happy about it. And look, I would just say that two things can be true. Yes, some folks fell for it again. A lot of folks got duped, particularly some of the quote unquote social media scoopers who are, not really plugged in at all, or have never been plugged in. So that can be true. A lot of folks got fooled by it and took something out of context that did not exist. And also, I will say the Russo brothers probably should have made it clear that this announcement that was happening on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, had nothing to do with anything with Doomsday proper. It was just they could have just said, "Hey, there's a surprise promotional thing. Be on the lookout." Blah blah blah. They could have just said that instead of just saying generically, "There's a surprise." I think a lot of people who have been trained to think, "Oh, if the director says something, that there's going to be something at this time or any surprise," that immediately means, "Oh, this is related to their upcoming movie." And it turns out it's not. So I think there could have been more transparency, at least in terms of saying, "Hey guys, there's nothing related with the movie. This has nothing to do with Avengers Doomsday. Actually, it's just a promotion. It has nothing to do with the movie itself. It's just a promotion. You'll see in a few hours." They should have said that. They should have not really, done this whole thing where it's like, "Oh, bro, we have this announcement coming out, man. You should check it out." And then a lot of folks got fooled by it. So now, as for the trailer itself, when will it come out? Again, look, guys, should have been out by now. Yes. Are they really dragging their feet on this? Are they really squeezing out the hype and whatnot? Yes, they are. And I think my fear is, and we'll sort of end on this, and I'll get this posted to you guys. My fear is that with this incident, and with a lot of folks, seemingly still to this day, even though yes, it's only been like a couple of days, but even still, they're folks are still pretty pissed at Marvel right now and the Russo brothers, that unless they officially announce, "Hey, look, the trailer is debuting tomorrow, tune in," unless they do that, or even if they do that, you're going to now have a lot of people who are not going to trust you anymore. There's going to be a lot of folks, now not everyone, but like people like me and others who have been doing this for a little bit, or at least been following the MCU for the past like 10 years plus. We know how this works, and we know when things when things start to get leaked out and then officially announced, right? But to the new folks who are new to this, and the normies, if you will, they're going to be very, very skeptical of anything that comes out. So let's just say, for example, I don't know, one of the other more trusted Scoopers reporters, Jeff Snyder. Let's just say he puts out something on, he mentions something on John Roca's podcast when they go on Roca's YouTube channel. And he says, "Hey, I'm hearing that the Avengers Doomsday trailer will be released on this date." I guarantee you, a lot of folks after what happened this week are not going to believe him initially. We're going to be like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, you're trolling us," and it's going to be this whole situation of boy cry wolf. Because now with the Russo brothers and Marvel, now granted they're not like, it isn't really Marvel's fault. It's more the Russo brothers themselves. But it's like, yeah, you're creating this environment to where you're going to start having some amount of people who are not going to trust you anymore. Who are not going to believe you when you say, "Hey, the trailer is debuting tomorrow. Tune in to, I don't know, the live stream on the Marvel YouTube channel." I don't know, man. Like, I think after what happened this week, I don't think a lot of folks are going to initially believe you, and they're going to be like, "Yeah, right. Yeah, you're just trolling us again. We're not falling for it again." And then the trailer comes out, and they end up realizing, oh, they were actually serious this time. So hopefully Marvel and the Russo brothers, they learned their lesson on this. But that was a whole fiasco that happened earlier this week that I didn't get to the show, because our show is mostly culture wall, but this is a breaking news segment, so it doesn't matter, at least with what we cover over here. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's anything else really to discuss. I'm going to get this out to you guys. Again, apologies for not doing an actual traditional extra pod. I figured it might be easier to just do this because there's a whole lot of things to discuss here. We've been recording for like 45 minutes now, which is kind of insane. So yeah, I'm gonna get this published now to you guys. So until Tuesday, we'll have a normal week this week. We'll be back to the regular, schedule at least for the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be on vacation again for 4th of July. For most of you who are non U.S. citizens, and that won't matter to y'all. Just I'll be away. Hopefully, unlike this past time, we'll have actual pre-recorded shows for you guys to listen to. So I'll make sure to get that done. Probably start doing this next week, probably. So until next Tuesday. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the nice weather here. Of course, we're recording right now. High atop Jacksonville, Florida. Beautiful day today. Another Chamber of Commerce day. It'll be hot again this coming up weekend, starting tomorrow and next week. So back to the usual summer pattern. But the last couple of days are really nice. Definitely not the usual weather here. Definitely a preview of fall, if anything. So until next Tuesday, again, enjoy your weekend and take care. And we'll see you guys on the next stream.